Crimson, what do you got going on for us on the Insight of the Week?
Well, this week I bring a quote from one of my favorites, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he says, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." And I found this fascinating for two reasons. One, he was featured in the podcast Diary of a CEO, and he talked about how we could be living in a simulation. I will let you go to that space to unpack that. But he was top of mind, and this quote came up, and I thought it was great because I truly, and I mean this as an entitled human, kind of thought it was supposed to make sense, Laurie.
I love this quote. I know. I think we can tell ourselves these stories around certainty and things should make sense and be very binary or cut and dry. And we do that to protect ourselves. But yeah, as an existentialist, I have leaned in hard to the fact that there is no inherent meaning. There is no inherent sense. It is all up to us and our individual experiences to make meaning out of that and everything else that goes along with it in whatever way that we will. So this is like near and dear to my personal spiritual beliefs. What's interesting, I love Neil. Neil came to my high school when I was a sophomore, and he came and he spoke. And my friend, I'll never forget this. My friend raised his hand. It was during the question and answers time. He raised his hand and he said, "Excuse me, and I'm so sorry for asking this, but do you have any pictures of Uranus?"
Oh, no.
It was so great.
No.
It was a highlight moment of my life. Everyone laughed so hard. Well, Neil laughed. We all
bet he
laughed.
did.
I think my friend might have got his wrist slapped on that one a little bit. But it was kind of, how do I say this? He was a mischievous one anyway.
Amazing.
So I've loved Neil for a long time, and I've had personal experience with him and hearing him speak. And I remember walking away from his session and really having this sense of awe around there being so much more to space and physics and even time. We talked a lot about time and the perception of time, particularly, that we just don't really know or fully understand or haven't unpacked yet. And I honestly, for a long time, this sort of stuff scared me. I think existentialism can feel a lot like nihilism for people. Like if there is no meaning, then there is no meaning. And there are certainly a lot of existentialists that travel down that path of nihilism. And many more, including myself, that have found themselves on their path and then come back around to a greater sense of embracing the absurdity of not knowing.
Right.
And being really okay with that. It's actually made me so much more humble in my interactions day to day because, like, I don't know what's going on. None of us know what's going on.
I think it is interesting culturally, though, how this varies or has a variation between cultures, right? Americans really, we have an entitlement problem. And I don't mean that from like a political privilege. I mean, we were raised, especially our generation, to believe that there was like this linear way that the world works, right? And that if you do this, then there's this. And it was always these conditional logical statements that dictated how we perceived outcomes. But that's not how it works.
No, it's absolutely not how it works. And reflecting back, it's probably been a couple of months, but one of our episodes, we talked about how entitlement is privilege without gratitude.
Right.
And I wanted to disagree with you when you said that Americans have an entitlement problem, because my innate was they have actually a control problem and a perspective problem. I think that's actually, if we look at that equation for what entitlement is, I think that's really the same thing that we're talking about.
Right.
And I do believe that there has been a lot of mythos built up around what typical normal life looks like. And it is all truly myth. People haven't been sitting in cubicles for hundreds, thousands of years. That's been 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years. And what does that mean about our understanding? Probably longer than 50 years. See, here I am with time. What is time, Neil? It doesn't make sense to me.
Neil probably has a very good opinion about that.
Yeah, Neil's like, let me pull out the old chalkboard. And
yes,
let's go.
exactly.
Oh, please, Neil, no.
Oh, I agree. It is an interesting phenomenon, and it's fascinating when you talk to people from other countries that don't necessarily expect the best. Thank you, Neil, for bringing that to the table.
Well, and to your point, it is a known cultural difference that Americans are extremely optimistic. Some people find that to be an off-putting characteristic.
I was with my friend from Jamaica, and he was talking about how it's partially because of our ambition, right? Again, it's this conditional if-then ideology that we promote in America, because it used to be true. If you spend 30 years at a company, you will benefit. If you go to college, then you will get a high-paying job. This is the first generation that will not see the opportunities that their parents had.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to cope with
And
it.
it doesn't make sense how we had such a great thing and then people pulled up the ladders. So that's another great connection back to Neil, because I think America is under no obligation to make sense to us.
Right.
But I take great issue to that as a taxpayer.
That's a different investment.
Interesting insight of the week. Always excited to see Neil.
Yeah, I love him.